Good morning. We are taking questions, and so here's a great question that came in that I think has incredible relevance. I don't think we'll get through this in one video, probably going to take a couple. But here's the question. How should a Christian confront another professed Christian who has ongoing, unrepentant sin in their life, yet do so with grace, patience, and love? So it's a great question. I'm going to restate it one more time. How should a Christian confront another professed Christian who has ongoing, unrepentant sin in their life, and yet do it with grace and patience and love? And so that last part is, in a way, part of the answer to the question as the question was framed. But I've got a number of things that I think we need to think about. I give you over the course, probably, like I said, of a couple of videos at least, we'll give 10 of them. 10 things you need to know as you respond and think about how to confront someone who's claiming Christ, but subsisting in what looks like unrepentant sin. So here's the first thing. Number one, you should do it carefully. You should do it carefully. What do I mean by that? Let me break that down in a couple of ways. Number one, with that, carefully, you should not make assumptions. You need to hear what's going on. You need to talk through things with them. So along those lines, you have to be careful that you don't impute motives. Oftentimes people come headlong. They see something, they see it going on, and they want to just charge in like a bull in a china closet. Now, you're going to hear from some of these things that you need to go in, but how you go in is quite important. Ask questions that get at the heart. This is all part of being careful. So don't make assumptions, don't impute motives. Ask questions that get at the heart. And listen, don't say everything you think. Don't say everything you think. Proverbs 29:11 is an important verse to remember when you're coming to confronting someone in error. It goes like this. A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. So a fool says everything that's on his mind. I'm upset. You need to hear. And a fool gives full vent, opens it up, turns it on blast. But a quiet man holds it back. It doesn't mean he doesn't let anything out, but it means he doesn't give full vent to it. So the first thing is a basic thing, and you need to do it carefully. The second is you need to do it, and a little play on words here, care fully. What's the difference? Well, carefully means, you're cautious and you're thinking through it well. But think about the etymology of that word. It means you fully care. You need to do it fully. You gotta have a heart that's actually invested. If you are more angry than you are sad, mournful, heartbroken, concerned, eager for their restoration, if you're more angry than you are those things, then you probably should wait until you get to a place where sadness is and mourning over the sin and an eagerness for the restoration and your heartbrokenness and your concern for them have caught up to your anger, or your anger has subsided. You don't want to just go in and sort of speak because you've had it up to here with what you're seeing. You need to actually care fully. Listen to 2 Timothy 2:24 through 26. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault. So notice that. It's not saying to avoid it. Go tell him his fault. Between you and him alone, I'll come back to that. If he listens to you, you've gained your brother. Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Galatians 6:1, first part of the verse, brothers, if anyone's caught in a transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. So you should go to him. That's part of caring. That's the 2 Timothy 2 text. But the adverbs matter. Like, don't do it harshly. Speak with gentleness. So do it filled with care fully. The third is embedded right there in that verse in 2 Timothy 2. The third thing after caring fully, and then go to him alone or her alone first. Okay? Now, I'm assuming when I say that it's not a man confronting a woman in private or something that could be given to impropriety. But let's say a man on a man or a woman on a woman. What I'm suggesting to you, or maybe it's a man to his spouse or a woman to her spouse, I'm suggesting that you go alone first. You need to keep the circle small. Keep the circle small. Because if you don't, you're going to create the opportunity for gossip. And therefore, you're going to contempt others to sin who might observe that confrontation or who might be invited into that confrontation who haven't really been a part of the situation. Now, there might be a time to do that. There might be a time to invoke others and bring others in. But first, you go alone. And this is just what Matthew 18 says, right? Verse 15, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've gained your brother. Again, that 2 Timothy 2:24, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault. And then it continues on, between you and him alone, right? So you want to keep that circle small. And doing that, by the way, you don't add to another's shame. When you expose sin and you do that in front of people, if you haven't gone alone first and attempted, what happens? Well, you can expose their shame and you can make them defensive because you're embarrassing them. And in the embarrassment of it, you might actually cause another wall to come up. So I think you have to think about the fact that you can minimize defensiveness by going alone. Let me give you a fourth. So right now you got to be careful. You go carefully, meaning you care fully, and you go alone. Fourth, you only go, even to this person who's unrepentant, after your own motive has been assessed. Now, that doesn't mean the propositions you're going to say are wrong, but it does mean that it's important that you have your heart in a right context with it. Listen to 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4 through 7. Love is patient and kind. You're familiar with this probably, right? But just let it draw out the description because you want to approach them in love. So love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant or rude. And then here's the one I want you to think about. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. So think about that. It's not irritable or resentful. It doesn't insist upon its own way. So the motive isn't so they conform to what you want. The motive isn't they've really ticked me off. The motive is not I'm upset and angry at the way that they're acting. The motive is different, which really shifts to number 5. So 1 Corinthians 13, 4, 5, but now I want to think about number 5. Number 5 is only with the motive of love, which is a way of saying their best interests in view. So that 1 Corinthians 13 text highlights love, and I wanted to emphasize in that you don't do it to get your own way. You don't do it because you're irritated, you're resentful, but instead you do it, 5th, with a motive that is genuinely looking in their best interests. So only with the motive of love, which is a way of saying only their best interests in view. Listen to 2 Corinthians 2, verse 4. Paul says, for I wrote to you out of much affliction and anguish of heart and with many tears. And if you know anything about the correspondence with the Corinthians, Paul was confrontational. I mean, 1 Corinthians 5, he's talking to them about a church discipline issue, and he's upset at what's happened. He is strong in regard to them. He refers to a previous letter he wrote to them at one point, calling it the sorrowful letter. So he says here, I wrote out of affliction, anguish of heart, and with many tears. Not to cause you pain, but to let you know the abundant love that I have for you. So Paul, who confronts people, some of whom he's, thinking they're not repentant. That's why he gets all the way to the end of 2 Corinthians and he says, examine yourself to see if you're in the faith. He confronts them and he says, it hurt me. I was sad. I had anguish of heart, to go back to some of our previous statements. But I did it out of love, an abundant love for you. It's like Ephesians 4, verse 15. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. So it's not just about a truth bomb. You're wrong, you're in sin. Might be true. But it is saturated in a way, a kind of relationship, and a kind of characterization of language where love is palpable. Paul, you might say, well, why would I have to do that? Well, Paul didn't have to, in one sense, say, this is born from my abundant love. And yet, in another sense, he did. Because he wants to approach them and confront them biblically. So, that original question of how should you confront another Christian, the first 5 things we've seen are carefully, full of care or care-fully, alone first. You have to make sure that your own motive has been assessed, and you have to then operate in the motive of love, thinking about their best interests. Next week, we'll revisit this question and think about the final 5 principles or items that we need to talk about in regard to confronting another who's in unrepentant sin. May the Lord bless you this week.